Hello everyone, and welcome to the Fulbright Distinguished Awards in Teaching webinar with a focus on interested applicants for India. My name is Holly Emmert, and I'm the Assistant Director for this program at the Institute of International Education. We'll begin in just a moment, but for now, would you please use the chat function to let me know if you can hear me. Again, doing a sound check to see if everyone can hear me. All right, thank you, Emily. Thank you, Deborah. John, Melissa, and several others, thank you so much. You are currently muted because the first part of this presentation will be us sharing some general information with you about the program. If you have any questions, if you cannot hear myself or the speaker, Taylor Delhagen, once he comes online, please enter that in the chat function, and we'll stop momentarily and do a sound check. All right? Great. All right, again, at this point you should see my screen. You should see a Fulbright Distinguished Awards in Teaching program opening slide of a PowerPoint. This program, as you know, is for both U.S. and international teachers. We will focus our webinar today, which is being recorded, on the Indian program. We'll have an alumni speak to us about what it was like to be in India, what he feels you as applicants need to know or would be helpful to know at this stage of your application process. But we're going to first start with myself just giving you some general information about the program. So I'm going to move to the second slide now, hopefully. There we go. All right, on this slide I want to give you a general overview of the program, and this overview applies to all countries, the entire program overall. Many of you, if not all of you, are very familiar with the name of the Fulbright program. The Fulbright program itself is sponsored by the United States Department of State, Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. It's funded by the U.S. Congress through an appropriations. It's funded each year. And IIE is an organization that administers several of the Fulbright programs. There are many, many Fulbright programs. And this particular program, the Fulbright Distinguished Awards in Teaching program, is administered by the Global Teacher Programs Division within the Institute of International Education, or IIE for short. Right, this program, which you see in parentheses, we have DA. Because the program name is a bit long, we like to shorten it and say DA or DA program. So if you see that referenced in the PowerPoint or in emails or online, it refers to the full program name. The overall goal of this particular Fulbright program is, like several Fulbright programs, to improve mutual understanding amongst peoples of different countries, of the U.S. and other countries. In this case, with a specific focus on teachers, particularly primary and secondary teachers, the schools they teach in the U.S. and abroad, as well as the schools of their host country, whatever that host country is. We also want the program to have an impact on home and host communities, so that is certainly a focus. And all of this is accomplished hopefully through this program, which is an intensive professional development opportunity for educators. So the program year that you are interested in, that you're applying for, the 2015 or 2016 program, is the 7th year of the program. So it's a young program. It's old enough that we've really honed many aspects of it. We're still, honing in it in other ways, but it's one of the younger Fulbright programs, and currently the only Fulbright program by name for teachers. And so it's an excellent program, one with some very happy alumni, and so we have a large alumni network that is available to provide insights to applicants. You just have to contact us at IIE, and we can connect you. Teachers of all subjects, as well as other instructional staff, such as media specialists, school counselors, gifted and talented coordinators, instructional coaches in some situations, are eligible to apply. One piece of information that is not on the slide that I do want to add is that if you do not teach students full-time, you're in the classroom for the full day, each and every day, then, for example, as a media specialist, you do need to teach students directly at least 50% of your time, because this program is intended to have a positive impact on students and their learning, not only on the professional teacher, so it's important that that student teaching component is there. So any teacher that is selected for this program can go abroad for 3 whole months, 4, 5, or 6 whole months, as long as they correspond to the eligible program dates for the particular country that they are selected for. Since we're talking about India in this case, we're talking about program dates that are between September and December 2015. So let's say you start in September and go abroad for 3 months. That means you would be abroad the whole month of September, the whole month of October, and the whole month of November. You could also go abroad between January and April 2016, again for 3, 4, 5, or 6 months if that full 6-month period is available. In your application, you will indicate your preferred program dates. We know that for some of you, it will be a guesstimate at this stage. We ask you to do some serious thinking and talk with your school officials, your principal, your HR departments, even the superintendent's office, if necessary, to find out when they would release you. Not just when you want to go, but when you can get that clearance. And we ask you to, when you put those dates in your application, to expect that we are going to move forward with those dates if you're selected, because we will do that. We will assume those are the dates you want to go abroad. We will check with you, of course, if you are selected, so it's not the last chance or only opportunity to list your dates, but we do want you to think about the dates quite intently before you put them on your application. And as you all know, the application deadline for this year is November 5th, 2014. For those of you who may be reapplicants, you are well aware that that's approximately 6 weeks earlier than in previous years. And just to give you a little background on that, one key reason is that it's a very long review and selection process. And so we wanted to be able to give teachers selection decisions, whether they are selected or not selected, as early as possible in the school year, because you need to make your plans as well for the following year. Contracts, sabbaticals, release time. So that's a key reason why it's an earlier deadline date. That is a hard and fast deadline. We do not give extensions for any reason. If something compelling and out of your control comes up, contact us and we'll let you know if there's wiggle room, but there's a lot of time to make things happen. So that is a fairly hard and fast deadline. All right. So here I've listed all the program countries so that you can view them. We're focusing on India today, but we do now have the final list of all countries that are available for the 2015-2016 year, and my screen seems to have hitched up just a little bit, so I apologize for that. The full list is on our website. Now let me discuss very briefly the 4 main components of our program. These are the main activities that you will engage in abroad. So if you are selected, several things will take place. We'll give you lots of information about the program, the schedule, all those sorts of things. But when you are abroad, the first thing that will happen is you will be placed at a host university. That host university is selected for you with your input if you have, requested universities or ideas of universities. But IIE, with intensive assistance from its program partner abroad, whether that's a U.S. embassy, a Ministry of Education, or a Fulbright Commission, actually makes the actual selection of host university or institution for you based on relevance to your project, your subject area, and other factors. You will also audit up to 1 or 2 courses of relevance to your project or what you teach, and more detail would be shared about that once selection decisions are made. So again, based at a host university where you take a few classes of relevance to your project or subject area. You will also have a faculty advisor at that institution that will help you make contacts, help you network, help you develop your project, etc. Another key component of the program is that you will visit local schools, typically as a component of developing your project, but also to learn about the educational system of that host country, to interact with host country students, teachers, community members. So the local school visits typically happen once or twice a week. The actual visitation schedule can vary depending on your own program goals, the realities on the ground, but typically you're in local schools 1 or more at least once a week, often more. And then the third main component, and I'll come back to number 3 on the screen in just a moment, but the third main component is the inquiry project. Now, I do want to say that in past years, including last year and the current year, we call this the capstone project. So you'll see that term on our website for older projects. Taylor will also mention it probably in his presentation today, but know for the 2015 and 2016 program year, we changed that name to Inquiry Project to more to better capture kind of the essence of the project. The main thing that your capstone, or excuse me, inquiry project proposal needs to demonstrate in your application is its direct practical relevance to your classroom teaching or educational practice. And I'll say more about that in just a moment. And then there's this other component that all teachers at one time participate in, both U.S. participants and international participants, because just as you choose one of the countries from the list to apply to, you can select up to 4. We ask you to focus your project on that first choice country. We also have international teachers come to the U.S. from most of those countries. And because we want you to connect, to build your own educational network, to share program experiences, and to just learn from each other, we have what we're calling a virtual collaborative forum. And you'll learn more about that once you're selected, but know that this is a requirement of the program. It's time independent, doesn't matter where you're based. We will ask you to participate at certain times of the year, whether you are abroad on program or not. And again, more information will be forthcoming if and when you are selected. All right, a little bit more information about the inquiry project. So this first bullet points basically describes that it's the culminating project of your whole program. Through that inquiry project, you're going to synthesize what you study, all the inquiry efforts you make, your professional development activities while abroad into this one project, whatever that project looks like for you. There are key things that we want each project to represent. One includes that cross-cultural element, relevance and applicability to education both at home and abroad. One little tip is every year we receive fantastic applications from teachers, but they don't need to leave the U.S., so their application does not move forward. So make sure that your actual project needs to take place abroad. All right? And then lastly, we need to see clearly written in the project proposal that you have a plan to implement what you learn abroad back home. What are you going to do with it? How are you going to have a positive impact on, again, students, peer teachers, community members, all as relevant to your project and your goals. But this is a wonderful professional development experience, but it is very important it doesn't end when you leave the country. There is a strong program requirement that you use what you learn, you give back, you disseminate, you share, and that needs to be in your application quite clearly. Okay? All right, and here are just a few, again, just a few of the program benefits for teachers and schools. You invariably will acquire cross-cultural understanding and skills, both understanding of your own culture and cultures, as well as those of your host culture, host country, host communities, professional development, of course. You get a rare opportunity to not only study and observe international best practices in education, but to live them in various ways. That's an incredible benefit to you as an educator. Also the benefit of sharing your own expertise with host country teachers and students, just as much as you will learn from them. We really require this to be a bi-directional program. It's not just you sharing what you know, but learning from them and then working together to make that into a new whole of some sort. Leadership skills, networks of fellow educators, those of you on program become your own professional learning community in many ways. So those are direct experiences and benefits to you as a teacher. And then you see the list of school benefits, integration of global perspectives, increased global awareness of students and staff that you share your experiences with. Typically there's an increased ability to work with culturally diverse populations, even more so than you may already. One key priority for the U.S. Department of State is for people who participate in their programs to work very diligently on how to better or best meet the needs of underserved populations, whether those are girls, racial and ethnic minorities, economically underserved populations. It's a broad definition, but applications, the strongest applications will reflect that element of how will your project, how will your program meet the needs of underserved populations as you define them for you. And then again, this final benefit that's on the slide, there are many others, but one final benefit for schools is a really easy opportunity to develop cross-national school partnerships with other educators, etc. And we don't list here student benefits, but many of these apply as well. Just really good opportunity to, as we say, make your own teaching exponentially better in different ways. Okay. So now we're going to transition into the Alumni India portion of the presentation. Before I move further, I just want to say if you have program-specific questions about any of the information I just shared, we may have an opportunity to answer some of those on the webinar, but because we really want to focus on Taylor's experience, that alumni component, what India is all about, I would request that you send your questions to fulbrightdat@iie.org, and we're happy to answer any questions you may have. I also ask that you hold your questions until the end. Feel free to type them into the chat box. I will be monitoring those as Taylor does his presentation. And then, Taylor, I will mention questions to you, and you can answer them as you see fit. All right. So I'm going to transition to Taylor's slide. Taylor, get ready. I'm about to hand over the screen to you. All right, give me just a moment. And we'll do a quick test to make sure that Taylor can hear and speak, and then we will go from there. All right, Taylor, get ready. Here we go. All right, Taylor, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I I can hear you. You're a little fuzzy.
Okay.
All right. So I am going to. So you have control of the screen.
Okay.
Is that correct?
Not yet.
All right.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay. Perfect.
All right, so before we get started, everyone, would you please type in your chat box if you can hear Taylor? Taylor, say something, please.
Welcome to Fulbright, India.
All right, let me do a quick check, make sure. All right. Sorry, everyone, there's always a little bit of this. All right, go right ahead, Taylor. Everyone seems to be able to hear you.
Excellent. So, why is that not working? Can you still see my screen?
I can.
Okay. Why is
All right, you're all set. Go right ahead.
Okay. So my name is Taylor Delhagen. I am a history teacher in Brooklyn, New York.
And your voice is going out a little bit, Taylor, so if you could get closer to the mic or the phone, that would be great.
Is that better there?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm a global history teacher in Brooklyn, New York, over at Crown Heights. And I teach in a demographic that Title I school, and most of my kids come from the Caribbean in some shape or form. So they're either first generation or second generation students, and most often than not are the first in their family to have the opportunity to go to college, which is really exciting in many ways in terms of opening up opportunities for their futures. And as a history teacher, I've become really, really interested in this idea of a single story. And as a global history teacher in particular, the single story comes through more often than not in the ways that we teach a very Eurocentric model. And we neglect to include that diversity of vital stories, which really foster an understanding of history. So very recently we just read in my class the Diary of Columbus, and painting a very single story of, quote, the discovery of America. And when we do that, classrooms retain a narrow scope of events and people. And as I came to find that these are not necessarily wrong, but they're just simply incomplete, and an author by the name of Adichie speaks very passionately about this and the danger of a single story, many of her novels and some of her talks that she does. And so this is like the motivation for where I kind of approached my inquiry project, and kind of sparked me to look into the DA Fulbright program as something to kind of foster this passion of mine. In the Indian nationalist movement, and you can see on the top there, my project is called Weaving a More Inclusive Narrative of the Indian Nationalist Movement. And so I already talked a little bit about this personal why here, but what I saw more particular in my students back here in Brooklyn is that when we told those particular stories, whether it was about the slave trade or whether it was about Columbus in the Caribbean, is that students really started to check out. These ideas of like feelings of disenfranchisement really took hold when my students weren't seeing themselves painted into the curriculum. And what I found that throughout, experimenting with pedagogies is that what I found was that when I really took hold and put mirrors up in the classroom for my students is that they came alive and really started to latch into history. And this is Zaire here off to my right in the picture, who really took hold. He's Haitian and took hold with the Haitian Revolution, which becomes and is currently today one of the cornerstones of my project. I also have Indian students as well, coming mostly from Guyana, but also from India as well, which also kind of really forced me to think deeply about the Indian nationalist movement, which is coming into here, why India. And when I think about India, not only just being like the largest democracy in the world and huge diversity, but this freedom movement, so going from 1857 to 1947 is hugely engaging for my students to think about. And so when I was thinking about putting my inquiry project together, India definitely spoke to me, both my heart and my mind, on a place to go. And so you see in the pictures here, these are two teachers that I worked with very closely at Mysore University, the school that I was closely aligned with. And then at the top there, a school in Kerala where I spent a lot of time doing interviews with both students and with teachers. And like I was saying, it was very engaging, students feeling like a huge solidarity with the Indian freedom movement, with the story of Gandhi, which I came to really understand as a single story within that movement, but still feeling that. But it is, and what really motivated me for India was my students were only getting this one very narrow glimpse of the Indian nationalist movement, and I feel like I was not doing that justice in many ways. And so India, being this huge diverse movement, huge diverse country, it was just really speaking to me as a place to launch into. And obviously what I came to find is that there are many stones left unturned. And so the story of the women's movement within India, the story of Jinnah and the Muslim movement and the Muslim Brotherhood there, and even thinking about beyond that, over in West Bengal, the huge calls for an Indian national army, which still holds lots of feelings of excitement within India, and through my travels and through my research come to find as a huge cornerstone of what the movement actually was. And so my goal in going to India was to thicken this narrative, not just for sharing curriculum there, but also bringing it back to Brooklyn. And this is going to be used in multiple facets, but really kind of instructing my own pedagogy of the movement and thinking about how to thicken that narrative for my kids so they kind of can escape that single story there. I've talked a little bit more about the research here, but I was noticing, Holly, you were talking about the universities that you're going to be paired with, and this is Dr. Bhatt. Dr. Bhatt was at Mysore University at the Regional Institute of Education there, where I was located and paired up with. And Dr. Bhatt was became a confidant, a mentor to me in setting up not just school visits, but just becoming a good friend and almost like a father figure to me when I was there. This is after one of our first meetings, first of many meetings with Dr. Bhatt. He was just great in terms of setting me up with schools that were local to Mysore and also connecting me with the other regional institutes of education throughout India that I could talk to and also go visit as well. And so one of my first things was to analyze how educators were teaching about the Indian independence movement there, and then unearthing teacher and student perspectives about the said curriculum there. And I did that through interviews, and I actually did somewhere near 150 interviews with students and teachers about the movement and how they were being taught about the movement, how they were feeling about that. And in particular, it really became about identity and how a student's identity impacted their feelings about national identity. So when I learn about the Indian independence movement, how does that make me feel about being Indian in the 21st century? Yeah, and there's Anjali, who was one of the teachers that I worked with in Mysore there too. Now, I think there's going to be lots of questions about living in India, and life in India is in many ways very wet. Okay, this is the first little bit of the monsoon coming through here in Mysore. Living in India also, you get lots of, it's very tasty, and my wife went crazy for the idli that we would have every single morning. We had our own little idli stand that we would go to, and really building a home around the food that was there. And yes, the dosa is absolutely just a center point of life in Mysore in particular. The Mysore dosa is legendary if you've ever been to South India. And being in India as well, life in India in terms of just being incredibly fun, and you should take this as an opportunity to really kind of let your shoulders down and really think about how you can explore your passions. And this was actually visiting a school. This is my wife and I, my wife who came with me, visiting a school way up north in Sikkim and getting a taste of what was going on in terms of the pedagogy around the Indian independence movement there. And they have a very different narrative of the movement. And so being able to travel around and travel to different schools to get different perspectives was, I mean, just amazing in many ways. Paste. coming from Brooklyn, I had a different perspective of how work should get done. I think New Yorkers are a little bit different in many ways than the rest of the world, even including the United States. And I was very used to I'm a type A personality, go, go, go. And when I got to India, it just wasn't that way. And so I needed to really check myself on my cultural norms and how I was operating. But really using this, I remember I had a conversation with Holly at one point. She's like, slow down. And she's like, you're doing all right, you're getting everything together, your interviews are going well, it's time to you need to experience this. And really kind of taking my blinders off and really thinking about what this experience is about. And the cultural interaction part is huge in that way. Frustrating, yes, life in India, and that's what I tell my students all the time. Learning is fun, learning is hard, learning is frustrating, learning is fun. But it is incredibly frustrating at times, going from bus to bus, and this is on one of the buses in South India, trying to figure out where to go. You get on a bus and you'll sit in the parking lot for about an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and then the bus will go, and then you'll get onto another bus, the bus might break down, and life is just different in so many ways, and it could be frustrating, but again, it's like a lesson in patience. And again, I have fun here twice on purpose. Just really, it's a different life altogether. And while there are similarities, of course, and especially in places like Mumbai, compared to New York, it is just like a different world altogether. And being able to remove myself from New York and put myself in a totally different situation is humbling, for one, but also just, for a global history teacher such as myself, it was just fun. And here is again in Kerala, where we spent a lot of time at different schools up and down the coast there, and just getting the opportunity to really immerse ourselves in the culture. And weddings. In India, the wedding, Indian weddings are legendary, and you should absolutely take, any chance you get to go to them. I was doing an interview at one of the schools in Mysore one time, and I was talking to this teacher, and one of her old students came in, and she says, oh, let me introduce you. And the student comes in, and we're talking about the lessons that she's going to be doing the next day on the Indian independence movement. And her old student gave her a wedding invitation. And then she looked at me, and she's like, you should come too. And I was like, okay, that'd be great. And so this is a picture of going into the wedding. And I didn't even know this woman, but she was getting married and wanted it all the merrier. So any chance you get, take hold of it, take every opportunity that you get, especially in India, because you never know what you're going to get. And the food at the weddings is also quite amazing. Reflections. As I came back from my experience in India, and like I said, I was able to travel quite a bit based on the type of research that I was doing. While I was located in Mysore University down in the south, the research really took me on the road quite a bit to different schools, as I wanted to really grasp a narrative of what was going on in schools around the country. And I only got a piece, obviously, in a country of more than 1 billion people. It's hard to make general sweeping generalizations about pedagogy there, but it was cool to get like a glimpse in each corner of the country, each pocket. And this was actually near Amritsar, near the border of India and Pakistan, which was incredibly interesting in terms of getting that different perspective, the Sikh perspective of the movement. Coming back home and coming back into my classroom, it really shook me in many ways, because it got me thinking about like 3 of the values that I hold very near and dear to me in terms of teaching in my classroom. The first one being community. And I really did, when Tiffany, my wife, who came with me, which was just awesome to have a partner in this expedition, as we like to call it, but in this work together to reflect on different experiences that we were having. We really did build a life and a community around Mysore. This is the Mysore market, the beginning of the monsoon. And even from like our local idli stand, like I was mentioning earlier, it was like an emotional departure when we finally left to come home. Every single morning we would come, we'd spend some time, we'd have our breakfast together, and building that community was something I hadn't done in another place in a very long time. I'd been in Brooklyn for about 9 years, and it's become home, but to remove myself and go somewhere else and then have to leave again can be kind of emotional. And then seeing that communities, that we build community in our classrooms all the time, it's something that we do in order to build success and academic success in our classroom, but seeing how it's done in different cultures, and this is in Kerala again, and seeing how they build community within Kerala. The DPS schools, Delhi Public Schools here, was able to, one of the alums from India to the United States is a principal at DPS Bangalore North, and I was able to, Bangalore being very close to Mysore, go and visit and do school observations and to kind of check in with her. She also became like a mentor to me. But it was really cool. I got to go to a graduation, and it was Manju is her name, and Manju was like, "You should come to graduation." And this is actually her students doing Thriller at the Delhi Public School Bangalore North graduation ceremony, which was just hilarious to see. It was also interesting. So Manju invited me to come to this DPS Bangalore North, and didn't tell me that I was also going to become one of the keynote speakers at this graduation. And so I show up thinking that I'm just going to observe in the back and think that it's going to be great. And then at the last minute, right when the speaker's about to come, she's like, "Yeah, and you're the speaker." I'm like, "What? Didn't plan anything." And so advice if you're going to India is to always have a speech in your back pocket, because no matter what school you go to, you're going to be asked to speak about your experience, and you are now an expert in American education system, which was not my forte, but I found myself speaking about often. Humility. Going to India is first and foremost a lesson in humility. Finding myself just floored by the amount of hard work that was going on in all those classes was just incredible. Going from class to class, this is also a school up in Delhi as well, and seeing the learning that was going on in places, and okay, here's an example. In Mumbai, I was going to a school and was talking to some teachers. I'm like, "Well, what do you do when the monsoon comes through?" And got like a kind of a quick stare, and teacher looked at me and she says, "Well, we put on our monsoon boots and we go into school, and that's what we do." And it's just like a lesson in just like, wow, it's like total grit of these teachers in many parts of India. Totally floored and really kind of shook me to the core that way. And also just a lesson in, I was asked to go to Mumbai to share about different seminar techniques that I would use and how I would actually pilot this curriculum that I built. And here's some pictures of being in Mumbai and actually using the seminal curriculum there, and just floored by like the sense of, wow, this is a totally different ballgame altogether. And having the opportunity to actually really learn from the learning communities that are there, whether they're nonprofits, whether they're government schools, but just really lowering my guard and being open to anything and everything. And also growing a mustache as well. And then empathy, another core value of my classroom, which was just like stepping out of my comfort zone here in Brooklyn and going to India, was a lesson in empathy altogether. And really checking my own cultural norms and really thinking about like putting myself in somebody else's shoes and how does it feel to like be in that situation. So this was at the Mysore University, and I did a lot of interviews with these 4 young women here, and just like really listening to some of the things that they said that were initially shocking to me, and really trying to uncover what was behind it. What was behind like the Hindu-Muslim clash here. And while I was very quick to judge at the beginning, within my head I really found myself stepping back and pausing and thinking about like a lot of the cultural conflicts and why it exists, and really trying to uncover that, and then thinking about that as a lens going home in my own home context, and thinking about in Crown Heights, looking at Caribbean and Orthodox and Hasidic Jew clashes that happen a lot, and thinking and trying to get to the bottom of that, and so using this as a lens and a learning experience to help me deal with that in my own setting back in Brooklyn. Yes, and of course, just feeling frustrated sometimes, but also using that as like a lesson in patience too. And then, and I know I talked to Holly about this too, but before and after, and like let yourself change. And don't be afraid of really thinking about, especially India will change you. India is a shock on all of your senses, from noise to smells. In one whiff in India, especially like in the big urban centers, you can get the best whiff of like dosa or chai coming through, and then just like at the tail end of that, you get a whiff of something that ain't so pleasant. And so really thinking about like, don't let those experiences leave you. And I found myself, as soon as I got back, I went and I presented on my research in the West, and came back and I was presenting for our school PD, and I found myself getting right back into the grind of things and kind of starting to let I was really scared because I started to let some of my experiences go, but it was very much, I went to DC to talk with some of the DA fellows who are going to be coming into India or who are going to be coming into the United States from India. I had some chances to talk to them. It's just like a reminder that this is now a part of me, and thinking about how to keep that true, near and dear to my heart as I go through my own practice here as a teacher. And so just like a fun little picture here. So this is like Manju. She's the principal I mentioned earlier at DPS North in one of the Delhi public schools. And that was like the second day. That was like our second day in India. And then this was when we left. And so just like massively changing, and I still got the beard a little bit going on, but even physically, like you just let it change you and let yourself go that way, and really embrace the experience for what it is. And so that about finishes me off there. And I'd love to open it up for questions, and please don't be shy.
Okay, Taylor, this is Holly. Thank you so much. That was wonderful. And I know that you could speak, I could speak, all the alumni could speak for hours and hours and not be done. So we're going to keep everyone muted just because we know that it can get a little chaotic when others can speak. So currently we have 6 questions, Taylor. So I'm going to give you 1 or 2, and then I'm going to mute myself in case there's echo, and then I'll unmute, give you a couple more, and then we'll go from there. Okay? Taylor, can you hear me? All right. Well, let me give you 1, and we'll see if you can hear me. If not, we'll figure out something. So the first question, Taylor, is how long had you been thinking about your project topic, and then how long did it take you to complete your application?
Okay. Can you hear me, Holly? Okay.
I can, and I think everybody can.
Okay, good. This was, yeah, definitely. This is this idea of like the single story and thinking about the Indian independence movement as a lens for that has been something that's been in the back of my mind for a very long time. There's no getting around that. In terms of the actual project, getting it down, it took a lot of fine-tuning. I had a lot of people look at it, including alumni that have done this program. And that was very, very helpful in trying to focus it and make it as concise as possible. The actual application, I think I was working on it for it's hard to say because I was like dabbling on it here, dabbling on it there, but it was definitely something that I took a couple months to really put together in terms of the writing of it.
Okay, that's great. And from the program...
Answer the question, or is it, okay.
Oh, go ahead, Taylor.
No, I was just asking if you thought that answered the question well enough.
I think so. I did want to add from the program management side that some of the, the last second help me calls we get are people who did not review the fact that they have to have their school board approve their request for leave, whether that's sabbatical or unpaid, paid leave. So if you hadn't considered that, research that now because you may have to get on their schedule and the next meeting may be full already. We hear this every year from people. So just that's an application consideration that you may or may not have thought of. Taylor, a couple other questions. Some are about timing of your program and location. So the first one is, do you think your program would have been different if you had gone in fall versus spring or spring versus fall? And then let me give you a second question is, do you think South India placement would be okay with 2 small kids?
Ah, good question. Okay, and can you hear me? Looks like I'm going.
Yes, you can. Go right ahead.
Yes. Let me go with the last question first, the question about having two small children. Yes, absolutely. And I think that bringing families on this experience is incredibly beneficial. My wife came, and she was very, very fortunate to get a sabbatical from the Department of Education in New York. And that was just such a blessing to be able to have my partner there to process many of the experiences that I was having, that we were both having together, and to verbally process them and to kind of be with each other during some of these trying times, because they are. South India is a wonderful, beautiful, loving place. Of course, it's a different place, it's a different culture, and so there are many norms that you're going to have to prep your kids for. I don't have children myself, but I did see, especially in many of the cities in South India, are like yoga havens. Mysore is actually one of those. It's an Ashtanga yoga haven, and there were many families there that actually did bring their small children. And so I definitely know that it is absolutely possible. Takes some flexibility, of course, and some patience, but absolutely. And then I think one of the questions, if I'm remembering correct, I should have just written it down, was about placement in South India and about fall versus spring.
Correct.
And I would say that, okay, I have two feelings on that. One is that I think as a teacher, it makes sense to go in the spring. And the reason for that, and from a very school-loving place and loving my school community here in New York, is that I think it helps to get your kids on track for the year and get them into a place where your classroom's running like a well-oiled machine, so that somebody can come and actually fill in for that position for the rest of the year. From another perspective, though, and so this is what you're going to have to hatch out, is that schools do shut down quite firmly in the month of March in India. That's across the country, and that's for testing. Now, I was able to use that to my benefit because I was able to meet with a lot of teachers and do interviews during that time based on the type of project that I was doing. However, I do know that some people have gone to India in the spring and they've planned on doing classroom observations during that month and have been out of luck. And so that's something to kind of keep in mind when you are applying, that when you put your timeline together, to be certain that you're doing your observations right away if you're going to be going in the spring semester. I think I was in classes within the first couple of days. Because I was at Manju's school in Bangalore, I was in schools right away, and it was great. And so the more you can do ahead of time to prep yourself to hit the ground rolling, the better that is. And then in terms of South versus North, a lot of people have a lot of opinions on this, and it really is personal preference. I love India, and I can't really say if I have a favorite place. Mysore really did become a home to my wife Tiffany and I. We had our flat. It was great. We loved it. And like I said, we built a community there with friends that we're still in touch with. And I think that can happen in most places. But Mysore, being a smaller city, was very nice to navigate. It wasn't like Delhi or Mumbai or Calcutta, which are awesome, don't get me wrong, but even coming from New York, it was overload on my senses. I remember the first time I had been to India, when we flew out of Delhi and came back to New York, my wife and I looked at each other and were like, wow, it's so quiet. And then we were landing in New York City. And so it really speaks volumes, the level of intensity that Indian cities, big cities, really carry with them.
Thanks, Taylor. Hey, two questions. One is knowing the native language necessary, whether that's Hindi or a dialect. And another one, which you may or may not be able to respond to, is we have someone who's interested in studying sports management, physical activity, and was just wondering if you could speak to the fact that does it contribute to student learning, anything like that. That may be too specific, but answer it if you can. So native language capacity necessary, question mark, and then sports management PE as a capstone project topic.
Both are great questions, and actually I can speak to both of those. let me start with native language because it's pretty easy to go into. If you speak Hindi, that's awesome. That's great. But it won't get you everywhere, is what we found. Speaking English, for better or for worse, and there are lots of opinions on this, will get you a lot of places because it's a national language and it's one of the national languages. And what we found in our experience in India, my wife and I, is that traveling like 5 hours in one direction is going to put us in a different spot with a different set of cultural norms and a different language. Languages to change so frequently. So we were in the state of Karnataka, and the language there in Mysore was Kannada. You go in a different direction, and the language is going to change to Tamil in a matter of like 10 hours on the train. And then you go to the north, and people won't speak Hindi in some places in the south. They'll either refuse or just won't, and that's not the language that they know. Which is fascinating on so many levels. But most people can get by with a little bit of English here and there. The sports management question. Really interesting that you're asking that. When I was both in Mysore and in Bangalore, and actually also way up north, yoga is such a part of the daily life. And I don't know if I'm speaking to the management part here, but the idea of physical being is becoming more and more of a priority, and I saw it happening in schools, which was interesting. And again, this is my limited experience. This was, again, although I did a lot of interviews and saw a lot of different schools, it's only like a scrape of the surface from what there is out there. But I did see that be something that's becoming more and more in the forefront.
All right, that's wonderful. So I only see one other question that I will answer very quickly. One original question was, can we teach while abroad? And the short answer is no. If you're meaning teach one class every day for a period of time. This is not a teaching program. It's designed for teachers to take a break from the classroom and to delve deeply into topic that they're passionate about and that is relevant for them. So Taylor, if you want to speak to that aspect, that would be great. But by design, the State Department wanted teachers to have an opportunity to get away from the classroom and really have an enriching educational experience. So Taylor, any comments?
Yeah, I can't speak to that enough too. And one of the pictures that I showed in the slides there, where I was actually piloting some of the curriculum that I had written, and that was fun and that was great, and it felt really good to be back in that teaching mode. I will say though, this is a time to explore a passion and to really research into to get your mind working in a different way. And I just continually feel so incredibly lucky to have had that experience. It is helping my classroom to have gotten away and to really explore that part of me that had been untapped for a little bit. And I've been so in this world of pedagogy and teaching and being in the grind. And the hours of a teacher, the life of a teacher, it's not the easiest thing in the world. And so it's really cool to get out of that time thing, and then just having a different schedule. Oh my gosh, well, how awesome is that? I'm so used to the grind of waking up super early, getting home super late, and having to be everywhere at a certain time. And while of course there's going to be deadlines for your project and working through that with different schools, and it was just I controlled my schedule. If I wanted to work late into the night, I worked late into the night. If I wanted to get up early, then I did it. If I didn't, I didn't. And it was just a matter of just being disciplined with your time, but also having the freedom to change it up. And so I would just, again, encourage you to explore that.
Great. And Taylor, let me just add, and there may be some other questions in the few minutes we have left, that at this stage, all of you on this webinar and all of those who will listen to the recording later, welcome. You're in full, hopefully, application phase. You're trying to figure out what is the best way to represent your passion for a certain topic in that paper. So what I would say, and Taylor, if you could progress the slide to the final slide, since you have control.
Mm-hmm.
So I just have briefly up here the program website. Make sure you look at all the resources online. Make sure you're looking at the U.S. teacher section of the website, because although the international information is similar, it does differ in some ways. So we now have posted many of our alumni blogs from when they were abroad. Many of them are no longer active because once they got back, they jumped back into the stream of things and stopped adding. But those are fantastic resources for learning in real time from them back when they were there real time. What was it like in India? What was it like in other countries? And even though you may be set on India, and we would love a lot more applications from India, that's one reason why we're doing this India-specific webinar. Reading many of the blogs gives you a sense of the program experience overall. So again, blogs are a great resource just to get a sense of what you do abroad, what it may be like for you. We also have social media sites, and as I've said before, but it really is true, those of us here who work on the program at IIE, we care about this program. Many of us are former teachers. I mean, myself, I've done a Fulbright abroad when I was a teacher, and we really want you to have a successful application. So call us, email us, and we are usually pretty successful at getting back to people within a day at the most. So don't hesitate. We're here for you. And so I'm going to stop there and see, Taylor, if you think back to this phase when you were, a month or so out from the application, what was most important for you at that time, if you can think back that far, a year or so ago? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I had as many people as possible read over my application. And people not just in the classroom, but trying to get perspectives of people outside of the classroom to read over and just to think about how to really narrow it in, and for them to look it over from the sense of, or from the perspective of, will what I'm doing in India, will that be useful for my school back home? And Holly, I know you mentioned that at the beginning, but just thinking from a practical standpoint, it has been so awesome to take what I did in India and bring it and infuse it into my curriculum here.
That's great. Thanks, Taylor. All right, we have just a couple of minutes left. We have one comment that is from someone saying that they're very intrigued, Taylor, by your comment about the yoga, since they're very interested in that physical education aspect. So that's something that I think may help this person in their application. I don't see any other questions, so I'm going to go ahead and close the webinar. Taylor, thank you so much for carving some time out because you're back full-time teaching.
Oh, yes.
And Taylor, if people are interested, would you be open to, chatting with a few of them? Hopefully not 300, but maybe a few?
Absolutely. And please contact me. And my blog is up there as well. So whatever you need, I'm always anxious to talk through whatever your questions are.
That's great. And just a final comment about, Taylor had his India experience. There are parallels with alumni who have also gone to India, but everybody makes their own program based on their own personalities, where they are, their project, etc. So again, look at various projects on the website, various blogs, etc. And a final thank you to those of you on the webinar. And Taylor, thanks so much. Have a good evening. All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.